Welcome, my friends, to Evergreen Spotlight, where we highlight one of our treasured podcasts on our continually growing network. I'm Julie Holliday. I'm a part of the marketing team here at Evergreen Podcast. Our mission is to continually bring you content that's always relevant, content that is not limited by time. Today, the Evergreen Spotlight is on Christina Jeurling Birro, host and producer of Pop Culture Confidential. On her podcast, Christina interviews the most innovative and influential people working in television, film, entertainment, and pop culture. Christina comes to us from Stockholm, Sweden. She studied journalism and has a great love for the entertainment industry. Let's blow up her show, Evergreen Podcast Network. New subscribers, follow Pop Culture Confidential. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Christina, in all sincerity, you have one of the most well-researched shows and Apple reviews. You have a ton of reviews on there. Also, Google as well. They mentioned that your show is fascinating and that the guests are also really interesting. And I wonder, what is the process like for you to prepare for your guests and to also get your guests on your show?
Patience. No, the process is really, that's exactly what you're saying. The first thing is getting the guests and just keeping in tune with what's happening in media. I watch everything, I watch shows and film and I read. And then the long process for me is getting guests and sending out letters and trying to figure out, some guests come to me, they have something to promote, and some guests take me a lot longer to get. And also just to plan shows that don't involve maybe a celebrity guest. I have a lot of great recurring guests who talk about, things that are happening in the business, or we'll do a deep dive into Spielberg's latest movie or something like that. So there's that planning part of the thing. So much research for you. And, and I know you have your journalistic background. So are you just like taking notes on all the different things that you're watching? Yeah, either I'll physically take notes or just in my head. I know people want a more interesting question, like how to prepare for an interview, but it really is patience, and all the work that you do beforehand is gold. The research process is just I love it because I'm so curious about it, but that's really what you have to do. And then once you start talking to someone, listen, because the follow-ups, that's where you get everything. So if you have your research, you have your knowledge, you watch the shows, you really respect the guest, then when you have that conversation, you can sort of leave that and take, a right or a left and follow what they're saying.
Right. Now, okay, talking about celebrity interviews, what do you think were some of your best?
Oh, I've been so fortunate. I am so fortunate to talk to some interesting people. If I'm looking at sort of the latest things I've done a couple years past, Brian Cox and Jeremy Strong separately, those were amazing to talk about succession and method acting because they have such a different approach. So that was really interesting to do one week and one the other week. Kenneth Branagh was fascinating, who I talked to him when he was doing a film that really went back to his childhood, something he'd never done before. Keke Palmer is amazing, so funny. Talked about Nope, but also how she's such an incredibly knowledgeable in new media. How much she works with Instagram and things like that, and that type of celebrity. I learned a lot also from Bo Burnham, who was really interesting too, talking about both his comedy and his film career. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you ever get tripped up in these interviews? I feel like with talking to celebrities, I would get really starstruck and just sort of like fangirl out. Do you ever have those moments?
Oh, yeah. And usually at the beginning of the interview, we sort of get it out of the way. Sometimes I even have a story that, why they've followed me all my life, or a certain movie that's been. And if you have the time, mostly when you talk to these really big ones, if you have the time, say it. Everyone likes to hear why someone really likes your work.
Sure.
Sure. That's also a good tip if you're talking to someone. So if you have something you want to say, if you have the time, do it.
Right. Flattery will take you pretty far.
Yes.
Do you ever have like bad interviews where you just like end the interview and you go, okay, what was that? And if you do, how do you recover, and who was it with?
Let's see if I have a certain example. Mostly if it's a bad interview, it's a time question that I don't have enough time and that I missed that question. And afterwards, like, how could I miss that imperative question? Either I forgot it or the time constraint went. And that can really sort of be very, very interesting because that's the question that everyone wanted to hear. And for some reason, I didn't get to it. That's happened to me a few times.
Right.
It's also happened to me a few times in terms of like, mostly it's technical issues, like the sound on their end is really bad, so we don't really hear each other, and that can sort of trip up the listener a lot, and that type of thing. That's sort of a disappointment that you know that this was a good interview, but you know that didn't work out, or that you get too little time. Those type of things.
Right, Christina, you've talked a little bit about really landing these celebrity interviews, and maybe you can speak to our audience and give them some tips about how to go about reaching out to these people or to their teams and getting them for an interview.
Well, I mean, that's a process that came long before Pop Culture Confidential, because I worked in TV for a long time as a producer. So the sort of guest booking part of it, I've known for a long time. Then I think you really have to find out who the right person is. One really good tip is don't send an email to just info@Warner or whatever. It won't get there, and be realistic about who you want to talk to. Maybe if you're starting a new podcast, you don't want to talk, you're not going to get Madonna the first day. You want to, but find out who to speak to, who's the agent, who's the publicist, or if it's Netflix and there's something that they want to promote. Most celebrities have something they want to talk about. I mean, they have a show, they have a book, they have a film. So, to reach out when something like that happens. In my case, after working so long, I got people who reach out to me as well. So it goes sort of both ways. Yeah. And then take your time writing that letter. I mean, really, what do you want to talk about? Give some background on your show. Why would this show be important? And be flexible. Say, anytime that works for you. Are you, can you do it in person? Can you do it on, to get what you want into that letter, so that they really know that you've done, research starts even before you do the interview. It's to get that letter ready, right, or whatever, or the telephone call, or however you're reaching out to an agent or publicist or something like that.
Wonderful advice, Christina. I love that. And I like how you spoke about the specifics of that person. And, maybe it's not sort of a catch-all, mass email. It's more very specific to that person and to that message. Good advice. Oh,
I know. I mean, even if someone reaches out to me today, you want to sort of, if people have limited amount of time, right, why would they want to talk to me specifically? What can my outlet give them? Why am I, that you want to see that someone's serious about doing an interview. Maybe you give a couple of ideas of what you want to talk about and things like that. I think that you certainly, if you're a huge outlet, you can get an interview anyway. But I think certainly taking the time to respect the guest and what they're doing, I think you always win at the end.
How do you think that podcasting has changed the entertainment industry or continues to change the entertainment industry?
Oh my God, immensely. First of all, in both directions. I was just reading a couple days ago that in 2024, podcasting is going to be like a $4 billion industry. I think it was Verge that had that. And it goes both ways. Today you see podcasts like Slow Burn, which became a TV show, the Watergate show with Julia Roberts, and, things like Serial and things like that are picked up from the entertainment industry. And from my point of view, it's this new platform, this new outlets where you can get an immense international audience. I have a sort of mixed background, American background, but I live in Europe and things like that. But I have one platform that reaches everywhere. It's a wonderful medium for both journalists, but also knowledgeable people who are covering entertainment from all walks of life with their, all kinds of knowledge that they bring forth. So you can really find whatever you're looking for, your specific thing that you're into. You only want to do a podcast on Dungeons and Dragons. Well, there's a whole slew of them out there to find, I'm sure.
And they have witty names too, probably,
Yeah. And also, of course, podcasts for established entertainment, corporations or everything from that. You have professional podcasts too in that sense. So immense. I think it really is. It won't be disappearing.
No.
soon.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and just the knowledge that can be shared, and so niche too. Who are some upcoming interviews that you'd like to have?
Oh my God. I have so many. I mean, there's so many people that I want to talk to. Let me think about that. Someone I was thinking about the other day who hardly ever gets in any interviews, but who I'd love to talk to, Amal Clooney.
Oh, as in
George Clooney's wife. Yes.
Can I submit a couple questions for that interview?
Yes. I just think, she's just an incredibly impressive human rights lawyer.
Okay.
I'd love to talk to her about that and just her life. She's someone I'd read, and she never, what I know, gives very few interviews. It's not that I'd say no to George. He can come too. But I was just reading something about her and I was thinking, wow, I'd really like to talk to her. And then there's all kinds of writers, and there's a whole bunch of new movies and someone who's I've never talked to, but who was incredibly influence on me was Steven Spielberg, who I mentioned before, who's coming with his new very personal movie Fablemans. And then I'm really interested in talking to writers and showrunners and things like that too that are coming on the show. So, and both really famous people, but just also how the mechanics of putting pop culture together is I'm always interested in that.
Amazing. Okay, I want to be respectful of your time, Christina, but I wanted also to ask you about, in your resume and your background, your bio, you interned at USA Today, which I know you have journalism in your background, but maybe you could just tell our listeners, maybe the importance also of interning and getting that sort of experience in the field, and just what it was like to intern at USA Today.
Yeah, I both studied film and journalism. And the internship at USA Today, I got through a sort of a relative and while I was studying, and it was so beneficial in every way. Basically, I was helping sort mail. I was in different meetings hearing how they researched. It wasn't the most it really was a job on the ground level, seeing how they work. I got to go to a few concerts and see how, the music critic worked and things like that. But just to be able to actually be in the room, to hear how people talk when you're that young, when you're still in school, and seeing, how much work they put into it. That was immensely but also my first jobs in TV when I started as a researcher, doing things that as a producer you maybe don't do anymore, just sort of writing transcripts of interviews and things like that, which was really boring. It's like, oh, can this please end? But at the end, I understood that I've really gotten to listen to the interviews that they were doing by transcribing their work and thinking about, wow, they stopped that question there and they took it again and they did that. And just, so I think being humble about doing those type of internships and working from the ground level was very good for me. But lots of people today who start in podcasting, they're just excellent to begin with. This generation is so good at media, so they can just start their shows right away.
That's what really is incredible. You can just hit record and then you have you really can have a show, Is there any last just tips for, because you have this writing background, you have this research background and reaching out to people. Is there any advice to podcasters?
Well, be patient. For me, since I had done a lot before I started this show, it's the technical parts. Like if you've ever had your editing program crash after an hour of editing and you pretty much don't want to do this anymore, that type of technical stuff, that was what, I've had to learn, and I'm still learning, and I'm still working on, getting the audio right and doing those type of things. And there's a lot, in that sense, that I think that just being patient and really learning those type of things. And then I think you really should, if you're doing, like in my case, interviews, or if you're putting up a show, really do something that you're curious about and that you want to talk about and then you want to listen to. It's so much fun and so gratifying, but it's so much work too. So you really want to do something that fulfills, that you have that patience to put on whatever you're going to do.
Christina, that is like gold advice right there. Is like, really love what you're talking about, even if it's something super niche, but if it's what you really enjoy speaking about, I think that's wonderful advice. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
And find a great podcast network.
Yes, and find a great podcast network like Evergreen.
Yes, that can help that can help you with the things that, that I'm not as strong at, and really sort of get the word out and things. So that's, if you can, join a lot of other people who are good at this.
Thank you, Christina. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. So again, want to be respectful of your time. So really an excellent show for our listeners out there. Pop Culture Confidential. If you like TV, you like film, you like all these celebrities, Christina does amazing work, a ton of research, and very fascinating content. So Christina, thank you for being with us and helping for Evergreen Podcast to continue growing.
Thank you.